Well, hello, Dyl Buckley.
Hey, how you going?
Oh my God, I've met you before. I feel like I've known you for a long time, but I haven't really. It's sort of like through people in passing, but obviously my boyfriend Harry knows you, the producer guys, very well. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I'm a massive fan of Kick It Forward. Harry and Giorgio and Josh, they're doing incredible work, and yeah, very much admire those boys a lot. And I know you and Harry moving in together soon, which is really exciting.
Yes.
So it's good to have the boys in Melbourne.
I know. I'm so excited for them to come. Harry will be in Melbourne. He'll be living in Richmond, actually, not far from you guys. I'll still be in the north for a bit. So
Cool. You're a North girl?
I'm a North girl. I'll see if I can. Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Well, good. Maybe you can convince him to come to the north because that's my plan eventually.
North side's the only side.
It is. Well, Dyl, I'm really excited to get into what you've inherited today. I've loved listening to you on Dyl and Friends as well. You are a really introspective guy. You've got lots of good nuggets of life experience and advice. You do though. So I'm excited to have this chat. Harry actually said to me, he goes, "Oh, Dyl loves quotes. He loves a good quote."
I'm a quote guy.
I love it
quotes.
though. So we'll start with your recipe today. You and your mate actually ordered this together when you lived in Sydney. What was it?
Okay, this is probably I was concerned with this one because it's the worst one of my four, but I was thinking about it a lot, and obviously these chats are things that mean a lot to you, and I reflect back on this time a lot in Sydney when I was playing up there with the Giants, and I was up there. I'd moved out of home in Melbourne, so the way it sort of worked was I was at Carlton for 6 years, living in Melbourne, and then got delisted from that club, moved to Sydney on literally a week turnaround. I didn't even know that I was going up there. I sort of just went up there straight away, and I'd sort of always lived in a circumference of 5 kilometres. I grew up in the north, played footy, a kilometre away, went to school within 5 kilometres. I'd had a lot of friends around the area and stuff like that. So I'd been living really quite central to where I grew up, and I like to think of things as a heat map. In footy sometimes, I'm not sure if in footy, but in sport, there's a heat map of where players have been on the ground.
Right.
And I used to think about that in my life. If I looked at where I'd been in Australia or even the world, where would the heat maps show up?
Yeah, okay.
And I kept thinking, far out, man. I've spent a lot of time in the same areas. Really, haven't got that heat map, popping up in other places. And I think for me, I was really keen to get interstate and, was lucky enough to get to the Giants. And long story short, ended up there for 2 years, and it was just an incredible time. And I'll tell you about the recipe first before we dive into it. But me and my mate, who was living up there with me, we actually got a house, me and my partner Justine. So she came up. She wasn't my wife at this stage, but we'd moved in together. And really quickly I realised I could not afford this rent. It was just crazy. Sydney rent is crazy. We were living in this broken down house in Paddington, so a really good area. But it was just ridiculous. We couldn't afford it. And I think it taught me really quickly straight away on if you just do things and make moves, things pop up. Because the next day my mate called me, who'd really, my best mate, one of my best mates, and said mate, I've just got a job in Sydney. Do you have a place for me to live? And I was like, fuck, I need this guy to come up here. And he ended up flying up the next week. We moved in, and when we were sitting there on weeknights, we're all on bugger all money. Really sort of struggling to get by, but every week there'd be this order from a restaurant called Frigatoria up in Sydney on Uber Eats, and it was if you get 2 for 1 pastas, it was really cheap. So we just get that all week. We'd eat the same thing, and the only thing about this pasta is it was really rich. So you'd always feel sick after eating it. And still to this day, I remember my mate sitting there just going oh, that's so rich, and it just turned into something he says to me still to this day. And brings back the best memories of just sitting there, you're just in another state. I've just got this plan of possibilities of what could be, living by myself, away from my support network, and really sort of feeling I'm actually becoming an adult.
Yeah, definitely. So you were drafted for GWS when you moved to Sydney. So you were about 24 years old at the time?
Yeah, 24. So yeah.
Interesting, I guess, that you say that's all that you guys could afford at the time, because I feel the perception is that AFL players are paid really well. So what was that kind of time of your life I suppose?
Yeah, it's a great point. And again, AFL, a lot of AFL players are paid really well, and at that time, I'd been delisted, so I was actually rookied to the Giants. And I'm not sure on the correct stats now, but, transparently, I was on $70,000 at an AFL club. So, that's a great salary.
Yeah.
It's obviously really, good money and you can live on it, but it is quite challenging when you're sort of working the hours that you do in football. And it's funny, you know, people might be surprised that that's how much rookies were getting paid, you know, only sort of 3 or 4 years ago to play the game. So, yeah, there was, you know, Sydney rent, we were paying like ridiculous money. It was crazy. But again, I could have gone and lived somewhere cheaper. I sort of just like panicked and wanted to do things that I could. And yeah, people might be surprised that that was what we were getting paid at that time. But it was definitely a bit of an eye-opener. And I think like genuinely one of the best things that had sort of happened to me, as I said, like I'd gone from this like kid who'd sort of grown up and hadn't had too much adversity sort of that I knew of in my life. You know, I was really lucky to have good people around me and grow up, and things sort of went my way like a lot. And that was a bit more of a, you know, getting like delisted and having to pack up and move on and learn more about like, all right, how do I, you know, change my lifestyle? How do I fit in with a new bunch of people? How do I like manage without my mum coming around? Like embarrassingly at 24, I don't know, like my mum was still doing my washing for me. Like it's super embarrassing to say, but she was coming around like helping me out heaps. And, you know, when we moved to Sydney, like you don't have that support network around you anymore. So it was honestly such a good thing. Like if you ask my, you know, wife now, like I really had to grow up in that period, not just in, you know, in chores, but you have to look after yourself.
I think any move is really like it can be difficult at any point in your life, especially when you're 24 years old. You are really young. I mean, I live in Perth, and when I go back to Perth, I went back not long ago, and there's that feeling of when I touch down and mum picks me up from the airport, or sometimes it might be Harry, and there's a weight lifted off my shoulders. And it's just a different feeling to when you're at home, because you know that your support networks are there. But that feeling of when the Uber arrives at the Melbourne airport and I get out and I'm all alone, I'm like, well, I got to fend for myself now. But it really is that feeling of, I can understand what you're saying about how you would have grown up much quicker over there as well. Yeah.
Well, there's a beauty to it as well, right? Like, you know, if your family or when you do go home, you actually enjoy more time with them. And I think that's something that, you know, being back in Melbourne now has been funny, because you come back, you want to be closer to family, but inevitably, like, you take those things for granted when you're actually with them, because you know they're going to be there all the time. Where when I was in Sydney, like my mum would come up, who I've got a super close relationship with, and we'd plan a weekend, we'd go away, spend time together, make all these like really cool core memories that, you know, once we get back now, she comes over, helps out with like my little boy, which is beautiful. I love it. But it's not that really quality time that you get to spend with people when you do live apart. Yeah,
definitely. So you moved to Sydney to play for GWS. This was the same year you launched your podcast, Dyl and Friends. Is that correct? You started doing your chats on Dyl and Friends. Before this, you were playing for Carlton. On your AFL career, was it always a dream of yours to play AFL? I know your dad, Jim, was an AFL player too, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it definitely was. Yeah, as a kid, like it's all you know, and just loved playing sport, having fun with mates, and it was such an awesome experience. But it honestly sometimes feels like I'm talking about another person now, like looking back on that. And it was such an awesome part of my life. Like team sport is something that is really valuable. I think like the most like transferable skills come from playing team sport at any level, let alone a high level of like, you know, communication, feedback, teamwork, you know, work ethic, all these things, like even the other sides of it too, like jealousy and, you know, the negative things that come from that too. It was really a pretty crazy like period. And I suppose to spend 8 years at the highest level, albeit like I look back and the stat sheet doesn't like ring massively successful career, I look back and I'm like so proud of what I achieved and even just what I sort of had to go through in those 8 years to do that, because it was super awesome period, but super challenging as well. But yeah, look back on just the experiences I got to learn of, like, you know, I was playing for a team that was on the bottom of the ladder, for a team that was in a grand final. I was in the best 22. I was out of the best 22. You're fit, you're injured, you're in a good mental space, bad mental space. You're dealing with like high corporates at clubs and playing for one of the biggest clubs in Melbourne versus the smallest club in the AFL. So I got a really good, I suppose, taste at like just all these different scenarios that have really helped me in the next phase of my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, super blessed.
Yeah, definitely. Do you remember the day when you first got listed?
Yeah, it's sort of boring, because I remember, and this is like the worst thing I suppose that happened, and I'm assuming you know, there'd be some football listeners here, but so traditionally there's a draft. I was a father-son pick, as you mentioned earlier, and I sort of knew at like 16 years of age that I was going to go to Carlton.
Yeah.
So,
wow, that's young to know, isn't it?
Yeah. And it was, as I said, like the best, worst thing that ever happened, because, you know, if I told you at 16 that you were going to land a gig as soon as you finish school, like your dream job, like how would you go? Do you think you'd like keep trying at other things? Like I just completely gave up on anything. Like I didn't try in school anymore.
Yeah.
Didn't like work as hard. Like I just didn't know how to keep going, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like I was like, oh, I'm already getting drafted, so I'll just like chill out and not do anything. And I just didn't know.
Yeah, this is my career path
Yeah.
now. Well, I had a similar experience, but in a different field. I grew up doing acting and I had success in my teenage years, and that kind of set me up, well, I will do this after school now. I didn't have the usual go to university like all my friends, that clear, career trajectory. And then that was hard when it didn't all go to plan. So I can kind of relate with what you're saying.
It's really challenging. I'm sure a lot of people will be able to relate to it out there. But yeah, that first like whack of reality is like such a, I don't know, it's an ego hit. It's everything. And, ego's something that's, spoken about a lot in young men, I think, and rightfully so. But I've always had an interesting relationship with ego, and a guy that I played footy with, Chris Judd, when I say footy with him, we're in the same area. I don't think, not to the level that he did. But he said something really interesting about ego that's like just stuck with me for a long time. It would have been when I was like 18. And he sort of came into our room and he said, everyone speaks negatively about ego, but ego's only bad when you haven't done the work. He said, ego's not a bad thing if you've put in the work. Like, and that's regards to into sport and I suppose work life as well. Like an ego and a healthy ego, if you've done the work and if you've put in the hours and if you think, if you deserve what you think you do, it doesn't guarantee you're going to get it. But you're allowed to have an ego.
Yeah.
An ego only gets you into trouble when you are probably doing things that you don't really think that you should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. That is really interesting. Well, you've got to back yourself, really, don't you?
And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. You're not going to maybe be able to do the things that you set yourself out to do.
And ego, again, it's an interesting word. I suppose it really does come down to backing yourself. It's not going around there and like, telling everyone how good you are, but it's that internal belief that you can do it because you've put in the work.
With playing AFL, did you feel like there were a lot of egos in the room and on the field?
Yeah, it's like I think that it comes back to that point I made just before around like guys had egos, but they'd done the work.
Yeah, okay.
And I think it just comes back to that like self-belief of like who they are. I thought I was working hard, but I just wasn't. Like I didn't know how hard to work. And I think it's a really big thing, when you're young, you might think you're doing the right thing, but until you like stuff things up and you learn from them, like you don't know how hard you can push yourself. You don't know what your capabilities are without, really good mentors and people around you. And I think for me, that was something that was like a really big learning curve, was like not knowing, a lot about like how to work hard, how to push yourself, who you surround yourself with. Like all those things are so important that, when I'm like doing good things today or bad things, like the first thing I do is like check my surroundings of like who I'm with. Yeah. Because like I'm a really big believer in like you are who you surround yourself with. Like if you are, determined, hanging out with like the smartest people or the guys and girls that want to like push themselves and talk about all positive things, like that will become your reality. But on a flip side, like, yeah, if you're not doing it, it's pretty dangerous. I've actually got a little funny story for you that is I got Mr. Miyagi'd once, and it's sort of like one of our coaches, Brendan Bolton, I love telling this story to young guys because I think it's so prevalent for like especially young men, is long story short, I was sort of at the end of my tenure at Carlton, and I was super negative, just like, the world was against me, real like victim like mentality of just like, what is, why does everyone hate me? Like why aren't I getting a game? Why is this guy picked above me? All things that I couldn't control. And the coach at the time, Brendan Bolton, I knew I was done. There was like a month left of the season and I was going to get delisted. And to his credit, he still grabbed me for a chat and he pulled me into the office and I was with one of the other coaches and he said like, oh, Dyl, like, how you going? And I was like, yeah, I'm good. And he's like, no, like, how you really going? I was like, oh, no, I'm good. In my head, I'm like, mate, I hate this bloke. And he's like, no, mate, like, honestly, like, this could be the lot. Like, how you going? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to let this bloke have it. I was like, mate, I'm going pretty shit. Like, you're favouring all the young blokes. Like, you never give me any time. The club's a rabble. I was like, you don't communicate with the older players. You're favouring all these guys. Like, all this sort of stuff, just like word vomited out. And he just like calmly sort of looked at me and he's like, who's saying those things? And I was like, oh, I'm not throwing my mates under the bus. I'm not going to tell you who's saying those things. And he's like, you don't have to tell me their names, but is Patrick Cripps saying those things? And I was like, no, Patrick Cripps isn't saying them. He's like, oh, what about Mark Murphy? Is he saying them? I was like, no. Kate Simpson? No. And, these are all greats of Carlton Footy Club. And he goes, you've got to be really careful who you surround yourself with, because the same people are saying those same things, having those same attitudes. You're all just like hanging out together and doing the same stuff. And I realised pretty quickly, I was like, fuck.
Like you're feeding off each other.
Yeah. I was like, shit. Like, you've just read everything. It felt like he'd literally punched me in the face. And that was like one of the biggest moments of, like, I suppose my maturity of growing up, being like, oh my God, like I'm sitting here just like bitching and moaning about all this stuff when literally like it has nothing to do with me. So language has been like a super important thing, and like, taking stock of like what's around me has been since then really, really important.
Yeah, interesting. Can you take me back to some of like the biggest challenges when you were playing in the AFL? Like what sort of stood out to you as some of those harder times?
The physical side of it is undoubtedly really hard. Like still to this day, like my body's like cooked. Like it's pretty, like I had 8 surgeries in 8 years. So it's sort of, your body does take a fair whack, and the injuries are just a part of the game. Everyone has them, and that's what competitive sport is. And, that's a part of, the price of admission, I suppose, of playing at the elite level. But I suppose from that, as well, the mental health side of things was always something that I really, I suppose, struggled with. And, as I was coming through as a young bloke, and why I'm so passionate about talking, not only about mental health, but I suppose just my journey and things that I've learned over the time is because I probably wish that when I was like 16, 17, there was someone producing content that I'm producing today. And like, I've always got that in mind of like when I'm doing something. Because there wasn't storytelling back then, like you couldn't listen to like any of your people or anyone that's been through what you're going through to get some like insight onto what that was. And I just thought no one else had those issues and never spoke up about anything. And, I'm obviously speaking about things that a lot of people live with today and thrive with today. I don't like saying struggling. I like saying like thriving with, and, those being some anxiety issues that were, in my life, I thought that it was only performance anxiety, and that being like when I was playing football, I really struggled on game day and never said anything for 8 years. Like I can't believe, honestly, how I put up with it for that long. Like being as open as I am now just wasn't the case back then. Like it was pure torture in the sense of like I would rock up to games and just like genuinely wish I just like broke my leg so that I just wouldn't have to like keep playing. And I remember my last game like I ever played, and I haven't played since. Actually played one game for a country club just for a charity, not for a charity, for the Carlton draft thing. I went up and played for Toura Magpies, which was still even challenging in itself. But I was like on a bus there, like I didn't eat dinner, didn't eat breakfast, couldn't eat before the game. I was on this bus driving out to this like ground in middle of Brisbane, and I was just going like, I just want this bus to like crash and just like not rock up. And I sort of thought that those things would, once I finished, I thought those things would go away because I wasn't playing sport anymore. But unfortunately, that was probably like the biggest learning of like when I left football, was just around like it was creeping into other parts of my life. And I suppose for me, it's been a journey probably the last 4 years of really understanding what it is, like how I manage these things. And yeah, like it just knowing that it's something that a lot of people go through. I'm not the only one. Not people have been through a lot worse, but it is something that I have a lot of help with. Like I'm on medication. I've had some flare-ups in the last couple of years, especially around the birth of like my son. And before that, I hate to say that things are connected, but the universe is so connected with these things. And I'm sure we'll get into my relationship with my old man later and how I think that has sort of been a bit of a catalyst of opening up a few things for me and discovering those sort of relationships. But even recently, like I found out again with my wife's actually pregnant again at the moment, which is really exciting.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. So
you've got obviously Max, your son.
Yeah.
And you've got another baby on the way.
Yeah, which is
congrats.
so cool. So really pumped because it did take us a long time to conceive the first time. So yeah, like even the fertility stuff, I'm super cool and like talking about that with guys because it's probably something that a lot of guys don't get to hear as well, which was
Definitely.
that was like another beast, man. That was crazy how hard that was. But to fall, the second time like this has been really, really exciting. So anyway, I can't remember where I was going with that, but it's been good.
Yeah, I guess your journey with your mental
yes,
health.
that's it. Yes, so that did
yeah.
flare up again recently just because of that, that thing of becoming a parent, I think, has been...
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it's been really the best thing in the world, but it's something you don't want to stuff up, and I think I just put a lot of pressure on myself.
Yeah. Did you ever wonder what life after footy looked like for you when your career sort of ended? And how did you feel when your footy career came to an end? Were you relieved?
Yeah, I definitely was. I was super relieved, and it was like I'm so happy that I got that second opportunity at the Giants. But I remember going up there and saying like, this is going to be, 50% footy and 50% setting myself up after football, because I knew when I left the first time from Carlton, I had nothing. I was so lucky to play sport and do all those things, as I said earlier, and was really in an awesome position to take my life to the next level. But I actually left with no skills. I did a couple uni courses. I went to do teaching, and I had a building construction certificate. But things that in reality I was never going to really pursue with a passion.
Yeah.
And for me, leaving the game, it was a really big one. And I suppose it actually goes back to my old man again. A lot of these things sort of come back to Dad, in the sense that my old man had a really successful career, 3 premierships, and he's one of the greats at Carlton Footy Club, and people externally love him everywhere. But, to his own admission, and something that he always drilled into me, was he didn't transition out of the game very well. And, whether that be, not getting into work or a few businesses and things that, didn't probably transition the way that he wanted to, and sort of struggled, I suppose, financially and with some mental health and alcohol issues post his career. So for me, as much as I wanted to have a good career, I wanted to have a better transition and be learn from my dad's, I suppose, mistakes that, he was really big on me going don't do this, go and try and do something outside of footy and start your own thing and be really passionate about that next phase. Because the reality is, you play footy till 30, 35, you've got a long life to live after that. And I really wanted to be set up after, but that's where the sort of podcast came along, and following that passion. It was actually used, I used to work in radio. It was actually used as a bit of a demo to be when I did finish up, I'd take it to a radio station and be like, hey, this is what I've done. Instead of just rocking up being oh, can I get a job? I was I'll show them at least here's a resume of my last 2 years I've been working hard. And even at my time at the Giants, every Tuesday night I'd go to Triple M and answer the phones for a show with on Rush Hour with MG, and it was with Liam Flanagan, who those guys have been massive for me. There was a rugby show. I knew nothing about it, but I was just trying to get my foot in the door of all these things, even when I was playing.
Good on you. You've got an incredible work ethic. I didn't realise that was part of your story either. We'll get onto your rule next, which kind of ties in with what we're talking about, your mental health, your resilience. And this rule is your mantra for life. What is it?
Yeah, so it's a funny one, this one. It's actually not mine. It's Oscar Wilde who came up with this quote. It's called, be yourself, everyone else is taken.
I love it.
It's a great quote, and it's a little bit cringe, but I love it.
No, I think it's important though, because we are so uniquely ourselves, and it's sometimes hard to remember that, I think. Yeah.
Quite literally, we are, there is only one of everyone.
Yeah.
So, when you think about it, literally, it is true.
Yeah.
And metaphorically, it is true as well. So, the funny thing about this quote is how it came about. I was actually away with some mates, and we were playing a drinking game, as you do back in the day, and one of those things was when you lose a game and the punishment's I'm going to post a photo with a caption on you and you can't delete it.
Yes.
So anyway, that happened to me, and one of the girls, Lana, had got my phone and she put up the photo and sort of wrote this big article that was weird under the photo, but at the end of it, it was quite cringe, but also cringe enough that people might still think it's me.
Yeah. And
then at the end, it said, "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." XX. And I was reading it, and I was that's fucking good.
Yeah.
That is me. That is what I want to be. Again, that's not me at the moment, but that's where I want to be. Because I suppose being a maybe speaking on behalf of like young guys, and again, just maybe to speak on my behalf, is I really struggled, I suppose, being a young guy around older guys at a footy club, being myself. I really wanted to be liked, really wanted to be the funny guy and want people to like me, but I didn't necessarily worry about people respecting me. And I think that they might like me, but they're not respecting me because I'm not being myself.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to be someone else. Like I hate staying up late and going to clubs. Like it's just not one thing I do, but I do it every weekend because I thought I got to do this. I'm a footy player. I got to get my drink cards.
Yeah.
Like we'd, punt on the races. Like I hate gambling. I don't really like use, each to their own. It's just not something that I'm like fully into.
Yeah.
And, like I love like watching movies. Like I love doing things that necessarily don't fit those stereotypes. But like ultimately we've learned over the last few years, like everyone loves different things. And I think that I was just forming myself into this like person that I thought I had to be. And yeah, when that quote sort of hit me, I was like, fuck it, I'm going to own this. And I think that for me, like again, Harry's really right here, but I do like my analogies.
I feel bad for saying it.
No, I love
But I think the exact same way as you. I'm very introspective, and I always use sort of quotes and manifestation tactics and lies. I'm the exact same though, Dyl.
I'm really big into manifestation. I'm massively into all that stuff. And
yeah, I love it.
Yeah, like I think that I can only talk about my own like journey with these things, but I remember at Carlton, I was very liked, right?
Yeah.
Like, but wasn't respected. And I remember when I got the opportunity to go to Sydney, to go back at Carlton, I was doing some media stuff and everyone was like, you're a fucking loser. Like, why are you doing that? You're not even playing. Like, why are you putting yourself out there and stuff? And I was like, yeah, like I'm not going to do it. And then when I went to Sydney, I was like, you know what? Fuck this. Like, I'm starting my own thing. I don't give a shit what people think about me. Like, I've learnt what I've learnt where that gets you. It gets you delisted. So, like, do your own thing.
Yeah.
So I went there and did my own thing and people straight away up there were like, cool. Like, yeah, you're going to do it, do it. And what I actually learnt by that was, like, your indecision and your, like, decisiveness actually lets other people then decide or comment on your goals and dreams. So I think, like, by me being like, oh, yeah, I think I want to do radio. Like, I think I want to do podcasting and stuff like that. People were like, don't do that. It's fucking, why would you do that? You're a loser. You're like, oh, yeah, no, I don't want to do it. But if you go in and you, like, go, I'm going to be a podcaster. I'm starting it tomorrow. Would you like to come on the show? People are like, holy shit, this guy knows what he's doing. Like, he's ready to go. So it's almost in the analogy again of, people are going to hate, like, my analogies. But
no, I love them.
I have this big one on with driving.
Yeah.
And say you're on Punt Road coming into work and you're in the middle lane. And I don't know what you like as a driver, but when you sit in the middle lane and you want to turn left and you just put your indicator on, no one's going to let you in. You know what I mean? In the morning. Like, no one's going to let you in. But if you, like, put your indicator on and you just sort of start turning that wheel, people stop because they're like, fuck, she knows where she's going. She's going left. She wants to go. I'm going to let her in. Yeah. So that's, like, how I come up with those in my own mind. Yeah. I'm like, if I'm not going to back myself in, how are other people going to back it in?
No,
like,
totally.
Do it. You just got to do it.
Hey guys, it's Ruby here. And hey, having hosted this podcast for a little while now, it has made me realise we all have one thing in common. We love getting to know the people we follow on a much deeper level. Like, we want to know who they are behind that glossy facade of social media. What are their daily rituals, their special recipes, and their life story? Something that's taken me by surprise, though, is I've become a lot more curious about myself too. Naturally, turning 30, getting older, it happens. I'm so interested in who I am, my family tree, and our stories. Something that's taken me by surprise, though, is I've become a lot more curious about myself. I'm so interested in who I am, my family tree, and our stories. Maybe you're in your introspective era too. And if so, I want to introduce you to today's sponsor, Ancestry.com.au. Ancestry has the world's biggest collection of online family records. With more than 130 million family trees, not only can you discover where your family came from, but you can find inspiring stories of your own family. If you love Inherited because we dive into people's pasts, you'll become addicted to investigating your own. It's easy to get started with a 14-day trial. Just head to Ancestry.com.au. Terms apply. A huge thank you to ancestry.com.au for supporting this episode of Inherited. I think as well sometimes I've had to train my own brain to say no, like I'm Ruby and I'm X.
Yeah.
Like, with my acting back in the day, this is what I am. And because there were always those moments and thoughts of self-doubt. But if you don't believe in it, no one else is going to believe in you.
And the thing is, you don't, it's really interesting the sense of like the language comes before the belief.
Yes.
So people, you can say these things and in your head you're like, I don't even believe that. But you actually start believing it because you say it and then you just start doing it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's all about language and it's something that I'm consistently trying to, and I stuff up all the time. It's a habit. And even with, when I'm feeling anxious, I try not to even say that because I'm like, well, yeah, no shit. If I keep saying I'm feeling anxious, I'm going to feel anxious. Even if I feel anxious, I'm going to tell myself I'm feeling really good and then like come out of it. So again, that doesn't work all the time. The anxiety one sort of is quite a hard one. But in other things in life, I think it's really, really true for me.
Totally. You've got to rewire your brain and your thoughts sometimes. And it's up to us if we can do it, obviously. But anxiety, I have an anxiety disorder myself and I've experienced that throughout all of my 20s. It's really hard sometimes when it can get debilitating too, but you've got to be kind to yourself, but you've sometimes just got to be the one to say, hey, switch out of this mind frame I'm in.
Yeah. Look, the challenging periods of anxiety that I've faced and thanks for sharing about yourself and like I know how debilitating that can be. Like, I've had weeks where you like literally can't get off the couch. Like I'm that wired that I just literally can't move. And you know how silly it is in the time, but you just can't break out of it. And something that's been really big for me over the last, literally probably 2 months, because I've probably just come to a really weird period in my life again where like I'm having a kid. I sort of had a bit of a mishap with some stuff. And I went and saw my psychiatrist, which I sort of see like every 6 weeks. And I really like the psychiatry element of things. Again, I'm not a doctor or speaking anything about this, but I found that like talking about that with the science behind the brain has been a lot better for me than like talk therapy.
Yeah,
because
cool.
like talking about things like just keeps me like ruminating, thinking and going in a bit of a loop. Whereas like if I actually like learn about my brain and why things are happening and certain things are going on, it actually helps me like understand it a bit more and recognize that this is actually just like chemical reactions in my body. And I suppose one thing that I come back to now and has been like a massively big, I suppose it's been like a monumental shift in my life is been my health just in general and like, having a family and keeping my core of my pyramid really like sound and structure. And the pyramid I speak of is like there's probably 3 layers to a pyramid of my pyramid anyway. And again, I work through this with someone else. It's not my study and data, but at the bottom, there's 4 pillars to keep this pyramid extremely strong, and it's like the biggest part of it. And those 4 things are general health, fitness, your food intake, and sleep. And those 4 things aren't going to like stop me from ever feeling shit or having a bad day. But like if I get those 4 things right, it gives me the best opportunity to then go to the next level, which actually has to be then my son, my wife, my family. Because if I can't look after myself and be in the best place, I actually can't look after them. And then the third one being work, extended friends, all those other bits. It's like I was prioritizing family, I was prioritizing like Juzz and Max, then work. And then when I had time, I'd go down to the bottom. And then it was just a loop of like crash. And it's come to that point now where like when you're on a plane, you put the oxygen mask on, you've got to put yours on first before you put someone else's on, because if you pass out while you're putting theirs on, you're not going to be much help to them. So for me, like those 4 things around, sleep, diet, general health, and my fitness being, like the activity that I do are just like non-negotiables.
Absolutely. You have created a space on your podcast, Dyl and Friends, where so many men feel comfortable being vulnerable and open. Like you are yourself with, your own anxiety and story. Why do you think it's so important for us to have chats beyond banter with the men in our lives?
Probably just back to that point. I just think about that 16-year-old kid and think about myself. Just I had no fucking idea what I was doing or who I could talk to, and you know, I was too maybe, again, in that bad sense of ego, not wanting to talk to anyone because I was embarrassed about certain things. And yeah, I just think back to him and just think like, wow, it could have been so much easier, man. Like you could have really, opened up and just talked to people and just had some help. And I don't know, I don't regret anything in the sense of doing it, but shit, I've learned from it. And yeah, I just hope that for me, it's not everyone has to come on a podcast and share their deepest, darkest secrets, but it's like just sitting there and being able to consume content. That's why I love podcasting. I've got my headphones in, I'm listening. It feels like you're talking to them. So I think just that like relatability of listening to people like you that are experiencing similar things at a similar age or have been through it already, like it's pretty cool to be able to have a platform that does that.
Yeah. What about the men in your life? Have you always had male figures you felt you could open up to?
I think for me, my dad, I've got a really, really good relationship with my dad, but it's had its challenges. And I suppose I didn't actually only just sort of like thought about this the other day for a while. I hadn't thought about it for a while. It was like the reason I actually think I got into this field of talking and wanting to like talk and mental health and promote those things and just talk about just conversations was I remember being a kid and I knew my dad was struggling with I didn't know what it was. I didn't even know what depression was or anxiety or alcoholism. I didn't know any of those things, but I knew something wasn't right. And I remember going, I don't know how to like talk about this. Like, I don't know, like, what do you do? Like, how do you fix these things? Like, what's going on? And I remember like all those times, like even early days, like get into talking about mental health and stuff. It was almost me just like trying to show my dad, I want to help you, but I don't know how. And I was like, if he sees me talking about these things, like maybe he'll come and open up to me and he'll see that like it'll be okay. Like we can talk about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's for me, like that's probably where it came to. Like I don't want to say role models. Like I think role models is a really interesting term because I think role models, you often go to thinking about positive role models in your life. You think like what you've learnt from positive things, but I actually think like I've learnt more from like negative role modeling in my life, and not the sense that was their choice to negatively role model, but I learn a lot from my dad, and the relationship that he's had and myself have had and my whole family's had has been, a lot of families go through a lot of hard things and it's super challenging, but just, to try and reframe that again in my language of being like, nah, like, this sucks, but also it's taught me like so much about like how to prevent or how to try and prevent this or how to be proactive with certain things. So yeah, it's like my dad's definitely my biggest role model for me, both positively and I suppose some things that, I can try and do better to keep myself healthier because, maybe he didn't have good people around him either to go through those things as well.
Yeah. Do you remember when you first spoke to him about it, about what you saw when you were younger, like when he was going through his own mental health? And yeah.
The first time I knew something was a bit worse was like I remember being at home and I was living at home at this stage, and I remember like Dad just came home, like, he'd go to the pub and stuff most nights. And that's like, it sounds weird me saying that because for me, I just thought that was normal. Like, I just thought that was like a completely normal thing. And not till like I went to school, I was in high school and like I'd go to friends' houses for dinner and their dad would be there. And I was like, why isn't your dad at the pub? Isn't that where all the dads go? Like, I just thought that was like what happened. And I remember, he sort of just came home one day and he was just like really struggling. I remember just didn't get out of bed for like probably like a week. And I was like, just like, what the hell's going on? Just had no idea. And then it probably took me like another 3 years after that for something else to pop up. And that's sort of when I had to have a conversation with him, and it was sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back, I suppose, just got to a point where I was like, it was nearly affecting me. He was doing, a lot of drinking, and my parents weren't together at this stage, and he too admittedly to his own self, like he was definitely just on a bit of a binge. And I went and one night, one of his friends had actually called me and said like, you better go and just go and check with your dad and at the pub. And I remember driving to a pub at like 10 o'clock and just sat with him that night for like a couple of hours. And then I took him home. And then the next day we, woke up and I was like, look, let's go for a walk. And again, I never had this like chat with him yet. And I remember actually just like I had like all the things I wanted to say. But I remember just like, I just broke down, just like started crying. And I couldn't even really just like get out even what I was trying to say. But I think like the message sort of rang through enough of like what was going on.
Yeah.
And I just said like, look, mate, I just want you to take care of yourself, like I want you to be healthy. I want you to feel good. I want you to thrive. Like, like it doesn't have to be like this. Let's work it out, And to his credit, like, again, my dad's like an incredible person. And, for old school guys, you're never going to change all of them. Like, he's still got his incredibly frustrating quirks that are, he's just fast and loose and just, everything's chaos. But he's been off the drink for, I think, nearly just probably coming on 4 years, 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah.
And, that conversation we had ended up leading to another week of going back and forth till it got to the point where I was like, nah, like I'm putting you into a facility and organised that and, dropped him in. And I still remember that, I'd seen him cry once before when my nan had passed away. So his dad had passed away and I saw Dad cry. And again, even then I was like, wow, what the hell, like Dad cries. And then this time I remember dropping him off at the hospital and I remember us just both just hugging and just bawling and he just went in there and, he hated it, but he got through and, like to this day, like life's not linear, there's ups and downs and, we're all still dealing with certain things, but I'm just so proud of him, like for what he's been able to achieve of just getting off alcohol. Like for anyone with an addiction, it's like, it's not just one thing. There's the alcohol, there's the mental health side of things, there's the coping mechanisms, there's all these bits and pieces. And like he's really flicked the switch. And I'm not saying this in a funny way or a demeaning way at all, but like if my dad can do it, like it should give confidence to anyone that they can do it because he would there wasn't a day where I ever saw him like, that's a lie. There was days where I saw him, but like it was quite prevalent in my life that he'd come home from the pub, not super, super intoxicated, but you definitely always sort of had drinks. Never drank at home though.
Yeah, interesting. So. Those conversations can be so tough to have with our loved ones, especially your dad, like your male role model figure. And I mean, that's a really incredible story and that must have been really tough as well. But also something that you talk openly about now as well. Yeah,
it's been a massive part of my life. And as I said, it's like even around the, that discovering about the relationship with him and then how that's affected or, in a positive light, the relationship with my son and how aware I am of certain things. And I suppose at a detriment, but also at a positive. And I say as well, like, my sister is she's a really powerful woman. Like she's great and she's scary. She scares me sometimes, but she's like just such a good big sister in the sense that she like holds the family together. And I think that's like a really good part. And I suppose like even back to that point that we made earlier actually around like, do you back yourself in when the times get tough? Like that was actually one of the moments where I was like, my mum and dad weren't together anymore. And my mum had sort of dealt with this for a long time. My sister was just about to have her first baby. And I was like, this is actually like my moment where I need to step up because my sister's been trying, my mum's been trying. Like, I have to fucking do something. Like, this is the moment.
Did this change your attitude towards alcohol at all? Because I know some people can inherit the same traits as their parents, whether it's within addiction or something else, or some people might not touch alcohol at all. Like, how did that shape your relationship to drinking?
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, I've never been a massive drinker. And I actually I had 8 weeks off the drink recently after my little, like, thing that I was going through. And I was like, you know what? I cut coffee, cut alcohol, and just, like, I was like, you know what? While I'm feeling shit, I'm going to really, I'm going to go cold turkey on everything. And probably wasn't the right thing to do, but I feel amazing. Like, felt so good. And for me, I've got to sort of try and say this the right way, but for me, like, I think that I could definitely get off alcohol and not drink. But I think that for me, there's a real strength in being able to control it. And I think for me, like I want to sit down and have a wine at the end of the week with my wife and have a chat. Like I love having some beers with my mates, but like I think for me, it's just like being really conscious of like, don't let it become something that you rely on. And for me, even with that anxious mind, it's something that as soon as I feel like I'm relying on it, I'm like, no, fuck that. I'm not going near it because I get too scared of like if that would actually eventuate into something. So I still love, having a drink every now and then, but it's something that I don't do a lot of these days, especially with a kid. It's too hard to get a hangover, man. Like I cannot be backing up.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And the culture we live in, especially here in Australia, there is a big drinking culture. And I've even felt coming to Melbourne, like a lot more people drink and head to the pub. And I'm like, I'm the exact same as you. I don't drink coffee either because these things spike my anxiety.
Yeah, I'm off the coffee. Like I'm decaf, decaf guy. Like, even like decaf long blacks. Like people look at me like, what the fuck? I'm like, well, I still like the social element and the taste and everything, but like I just don't really need. When someone's pinging off anxiety, you don't really need a coffee. Like it's like you're getting to my level right now. Like I'm already there. Yeah. So I don't need that. Yeah. Like I think I'm just becoming, more comfortable again in myself, be yourself, everyone else is taken, man. Like if you don't want to drink, don't drink. If you don't want to drink coffee, don't do it. Yeah. Do what you want to do. Do what you want to do. Look after yourself. And I do really think there is a big movement. A lot more people are cutting down their alcohol intake and going 100%. Sober. There's a lot more non-alcoholic, types of alcohol too. So you'd rarely see me with a full strength. Like it's always a midi or even a non-alc. Like it's just health, but also hangovers, no good. Well, we will end on your ritual today. Yeah. And this is what you do with your son, Max. What is it? Okay, so I think for me, my most special part of my week is my weekends. Saturday, Sunday with Max are just, incredible. Like waking up, from that first, like, yell out, go and get him, get breakfast. He's just talking about, like, he's not really speaking English yet, but there's some words in there that are sort of making sense. And we normally get up straight away, go get a coffee or decaf coffee, go to swimming lessons. After that, we'll go to the park, come home, nap time, which like for me, I nap when he naps. So I'm really looking forward to I'm really not looking forward to when that naps drop because that's like a really big part of my week too. Like I nap for like a half an hour when he's down for 2 hours. Yeah. And then whilst that time's on, hopefully for me, like a really big part of my thing, my schedule at the moment and a big part of my like life, I listen to this song by Frankie Stew and Harvey Gunn. And he says this thing is like play a role, like, take the bins out. And it's been a big thing for mine. Like I always do the bins. So whether it's just like, I always go on the weekends, break up all the cardboard that Juzz has ordered 500 boxes from Amazon, break them up, mow the lawns. And then Max gets up and then we're on again, whether that's like a bike ride, go to another park. And then you just get to the end of the day and you're like absolutely spent, watch TV, go to bed, do it again on Sunday. Like that's just like how the weekend works, which, for me was actually quite a scary thing. When I did have a kid, I was like, fuck, I'm going to lose my life here. Like I'm not going to have the weekends to see my friends anymore and stuff. And I think that it wasn't a straight away thing that I enjoyed straight away, but it's become my favorite part of my life. Like, going like he just is addicted to the swing and just like will not get off the swing. Like, I'm not joking. Like for an hour, he'll just be on the swing. And like, if I pushed him any harder, he'd do a fucking flip like around the thing. Like he's just crazy. So all those things. Yeah. Like I think speaking to any young, maybe parents out there that are expecting or having a kids, like don't put pressure on yourself to enjoy some things. Cause sometimes when it is early, like I did probably struggle with the patience of like doing tummy time and all those things. But like now it's really come into my own of like, oh, this guy's like walking and running and we're riding on the bikes and we're having fun. And, he's 2 in April and he's just genuinely unbelievable. And I will add to that as well, like, seeing my wife like become a mum is just, it's been probably the coolest live movie like I've ever seen in my life. Just seeing her do that has been really, really incredible. And she's just so good at it. And, the way that he looks at her as well and the way that I love my mum, I can see that that love for Juzz from Max. And yeah, like I secretly love it when he says, like, I always go, like, who do you love more, mum or dada? And if he says mama, I'm like, oh, good boy. You know, like, it's a good, like, I want you to love your mum the most. Like, so yeah.
Beautiful, Dyl. Hi guys, Ruby here. I hope you loved today's episode of Inherited, but more so, I hope it's encouraged you to think about your own story. Even if you're all over your family tree, today's sponsor, Ancestry.com.au, is here to remind you there could be more to your story. They have the world's largest collection of family records, and there's never been a better time to start exploring yours. With new data available, such as the England and Wales 1921 census, get started with a free 14-day trial at Ancestry.com.au. All you need is your grandparent's name. A huge thank you to Ancestry.com.au for supporting this episode of Inherited. What do you think has been the best part about becoming a dad? I do know you and your wife, Juzzy, had a bit of a tough road, you did mention earlier, towards becoming parents too. Yeah,
it was like, look, I know a lot of people deal with fertility issues, and I love that. I love what Michelle's done with her podcast as well, like bringing light to all that stuff. And it's a super challenging period. Like, not gonna lie, it's very, very lonely place. And Juzz and I were both, we just wanted to be parents, always wanted to be parents, and went through a couple of years of some issues. We had a couple of ectopic pregnancies. We had a lot of a lot of cycles of IVF, and just unfortunately weren't able to. It just didn't react to her body at that time, and just wasn't the right time for us to do that. And fortunately we ended up falling pregnant naturally, which was, what we thought was 1 in a million, because the first 2 times we'd fell pregnant were both ectopic pregnancies. And I'm sure you're aware of what an ectopic is, but it gets stuck in the fallopian tube.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So one of them got removed, and then the next one happened maybe a couple months later, and that got stuck as well. And I remember so clearly the doctor came in and was like, oh, we're going to have to take this one out. But then the only thing will be is you'll need to do, the only way you'll conceive is IVF. And I remember just saying to the guy, like, nah, like, mate, you need to leave it in, just in case, just leave it in. Anyway, we were sort of too scared to try conventionally, and went to IVF and, did that stuff. And again, it just wasn't really working, weren't getting great results. And it was just super taxing, like the rounds and the procedures of what you have to do. And like Juzz was just like, I just felt so guilty for not being able to take any of that pain from her. Like, she was just, obviously taking so many retrievals and the injections and all those things. And it just didn't work. And we ended up falling pregnant. But then the big thing was like, fuck, like, is it going to make it through?
Of course.
And they flushed the fallopian tube. And then a few months later we went away, fell pregnant, and then it got through. So naturally, and that's Max. And it's just like, it's crazy to think that all those years got us to this man, this little boy, because can't imagine ever not having him, and that's why I suppose it took us, in a universal way. I suppose it's the way I sort of come to terms with it. That's why it took us a while, just because he was waiting. And the second one, fuck, we weren't expecting that. So that was pretty cool. But I suppose for us, we were just like, look, it took us so long last time. Like, let's just see what happens. And, it took a few months, but it was, really, really heartwarming. And I know no stories are the same, and hopefully someone can take something out of that. But I know that it is a really isolating feeling, and just, be kind to yourself and look after yourself, look after that pyramid,
Definitely. Yeah, emotionally, it would be very, very taxing, and you're supporting each other, but also going through the same thing at the same time. Yeah. What part of starting a family with Juzzy are you most proud of?
So much. I think for our relationship, it's super important to me, obviously. But we're such different people, so different in the sense of she's incredibly intelligent, very, very academic, smart, beautiful, shy, reserved. Everything she says is very, she's very measured and very, doesn't react to things, and doesn't panic, or she never panics. She's not flustered. It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm highly strung, anxious, like, just sporadic. Like I'll just do things on a whim. Like even if I'm not ready, like I'm just going to start a business tomorrow with no business plan. Like it's just like I'm just a doer. Like I just do. Whereas she will plan the whole thing, but then like be hesitant on starting. So together, I like to say we're a very good team. And I think that, I'm percentage-wise like 90% of who I've probably become in my older life is her. Like she's helped me so much, like on everything. And I suppose like, we've been together since we were in high school. She was a year older than me, so I had a sugar mama. She used to pick me up from school. So she was a year out, and I was like, "Yeah, boys." She used to pick me up, and then just like from growing through that period where you're dating and you're friends and 4 years and whatever the time was, and you're there.
Yeah.
But I think the real big thing for us was when we moved to Sydney together, and we're like, all right, it's actually us now. Like, and we became into each other's life, and then. Again, that next period of like the fertility battle, you're like, holy fuck, like I didn't think I could get close to this person, but now I am.
Yeah.
And then the parental relationship of like, you're a team. Like you got to see it as teamwork. And I think that, just as I mentioned, like becoming a parent and parenthood, like for me, it's been amazing. And, like there's so many, I think even people out there today who either want kids or don't want kids, and like that's completely understandable. Like it is a life-changing thing, and it's super challenging at times, but it's also incredibly rewarding. And I think for me, like my favorite thing about parenthood is seeing how proud other people are. Like my favorite times are when I'm just like sitting back watching like my mum play with Max, and like watching my boy play with like my sister's kids and then her sister's kids. Like I just look back and sort of think like, fuck, like this is amazing. Like my boys playing with my sister's boy and girl and Juzzy's sister's kids and brother's kids. And I'm just like, what is going on? And like I look at him as well, and I have really big thumbs. Can you see how big my thumbs are?
Yeah.
Like my fingernails?
They are a bit, you do have big fingernails actually.
They're quite large.
Yeah.
So it's just something that like I've always had, and I've never seen anyone who has bigger nails than me.
Yes.
Like that. And Max has got my thumbs.
And your hands, probably.
And my hands.
Like the older he gets, you probably notice. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, like that is fucking awesome. Like I just look at them all the time, and I'm just like, mate, like these are my hands, like our hands.
Well, you're an awesome dad, Dyl, and an awesome person. I've loved this chat with you. We do end every episode with one question on Inherited, and it's, what do you intend to pass on? And who would you like to pass it on to? Yeah.
I'm a really, really lucky person, and I've had a lot of help from a lot of people along the way, and whether that be through role models, both positive, like all these things, like I've just had a natural knack for finding really incredible people and gravitating to like really, really special people. And, when I find someone like that I admire something in them, like I just go to certain people that I can learn off and surround myself with. But I have got a funny story actually that I've never really told. But growing up, I ended up getting a scholarship to a school in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And it was a scholarship whereby it was like a general excellence scholarship. Definitely wasn't generally excellent, but it was around like just sport and coming into the school and those sort of things. And long story short, I think my family thought it was a full scholarship. It ended up being a half scholarship. And at that time, I didn't know this, but like they didn't have the means to support that school, tertiary fees and all those sort of things, which is incredibly expensive. And there was actually someone came forward from the school and offered to pay my school so they'd help me go through school. And I didn't know that until like I finished. Long story short, when I found this out, I was like, wow, like it just blew my mind. And I really do look back to my schooling days of not the academic prowess that I may have learnt, but just more in the relationships, the people I got to meet. I'm not a pro. I think the education at any school and the relationships at any school you go to, they're all the same. Like I didn't get smarter from going to anything, but I think this opportunity to go to this private school, I went, didn't know anyone that I was going with. Again, got me out of my comfort zone. I grew up in a small sort of town, I grew up in a small, in Norfolk, Troy, where we were in a small sort of house, and my family grew up a certain way. As I said earlier, like I just thought that was normal because a lot of the kids around my area had done that too. Where when I went to this other school, I learnt that like there was other things in life as well. Like I'd actually opened my eyes up. That not that these things are important; they're quite materialistic in a way, and I realised that there's actually more the other way. But it actually made me go like, fuck, like I didn't know you could have a pool in your house. Like, I didn't know that was like a thing. And it just like opened up my mind to like all these things, like these possibilities that could eventuate in life that I hadn't seen before. And that was like a really big step for me because it opened my mind to going like, what is possible here in life? Like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And, that's come in round spurts and rounds around, what's actually important in life. Like, is it material things or is it love? And, for me, you meet somewhere in the middle of those things. Like, who doesn't want to have a nice house one day? Like, I think we're lying if we don't want to have like a nice place to sleep at night. Like, there's no harm in wanting those things, but also let's get the right things important first to have a happy family in that home.
Yeah.
I'll get to the main point of this, but long story short, I found out this guy had done this, and I ended up getting his number and giving him a call, and just sort of relayed those messages that I just said to you about like how much it had impacted my life and how grateful I was for the opportunity, and that, for me going forward, that one day I want to be in the position to pay this forward and give it to someone else.
Yeah.
And to give someone else this opportunity to go to school or to have a scholarship in some form to, reach their potential if it's not possible for someone. And I just remember he had the coolest ever finishing line, and he said, Dylan, I have no idea what you're talking about, but if I did, I'd be extremely proud of you. And I was just like, fucking hell, mic drop. That was like some real Batman shit. Like he's just like denied that he even helped me, but then like said he was really proud of me.
I'm so proud of you.
And I was like, wow, what a cool guy. I want to be that cool. So yeah, it was a really, really nice moment.
So that's kind of the legacy that you want to maybe pass on yourself.
Yeah, like it doesn't have to be, like again, that was a pretty, hopefully I'm in a position to do that, but it was more in the sense of like actually being able to help someone else.
Of
like
course.
I would love to have an impact on someone's life where I'm like, that was that big. And, whilst for that person, I'm sure they were really successful in their field, obviously, and could, have the means to do that. And I'm not saying that that's a priority for me, but more in the sense of having impact in some way. It could be through mentoring. It could be through something like that. But whatever it is, I want to try and have someone that I can really give a leg up to.
Yeah. Well, Dyl, I'm sure everyone listening to our chat today will feel like they've learned something and taken something from you. All the mates that you work with on your show, Dyl and Friends, the people you chat to. It's been so good to chat to you as well. Thank you so much for coming on Inherited.
You. Yeah, man.
I loved getting deep.
Yeah, I'm a deep guy, man. I'm always that guy at like after like one beer, everyone's like, man, shut up. Like, we don't need to talk about that stuff.
No, we do. No, we definitely do. Yeah. I'm that girl as well. So thank you so much, Dyl. I really appreciate you coming on.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks, heaps, Rubes.
You've been watching Inherited, and just a quick one, we are a new show, so if you want to help support us, make sure you click subscribe on YouTube and hit the like button right now as well. It's how we grow our audience, and it's really the best way for us to continue speaking to incredible guests. We'll be back with another episode next Tuesday. I'll see you then.